Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Border.
Yes.
Or in the Swedish, Grants. Which is a Swedish sort of fantasy. Well, it's directed by a guy called Ali Abbasi, who's an Iranian-Danish director. He was born in Tehran and he's lived and worked in Copenhagen for a long time, I think. And it's written by Abbasi, Isabella Eklöf, and Jon Ajvide Lindqvist, who's the guy who wrote the original short story, and he's also the guy who wrote the book and I think screenplay for Let the Right One In, which is that arty vampire movie that everyone loved.
That I loved, yes.
I wasn't that crazy about Let the Right One In, but
I loved it.
I think it may have been a victim of its hype.
Okay. I loved it and we should watch it again. I mean, what did you think of this one?
This one I liked more, but I will say I think it's a function of the same thing, because this, I've had a quick look round and it's had very, very good reviews. I hadn't heard of it at all. And it won the Uncertain Regard prize at the Cannes Film Festival. So like it's not like a rubbish sequel or something. It's a good movie, but the fact that I haven't heard of it and come to it with no particular expectations, I think means it helped me like it more.
Okay. Well, like you, I had not heard of it. The reason why we've seen it, in fact, is because it's such a shit season at the cinema at the moment. I mean, there's really nothing on, right?
Yeah, so Toy Story, we might see Lion King, but that's it.
Yeah. And, I'm not looking forward to seeing Lion King. So there's nothing to see. And I thought, well, this will be a good time to check out what MUBI has, right? And so basically, this was just a little bit random, right? So we checked through the MUBI listings and we wanted something, that they've been showing for the last 2 weeks, because as you might know, MUBI is curated, so, they have a film a day for 30 days, and they basically last for 30 days. So we wanted something where we could do a podcast and where you might have the opportunity to listen in while it's still playing at MUBI.
Yeah, so, I think by the time this podcast comes out, it will have a little over a week left to play.
Right.
So you can still catch it.
That's right. So that was basically the criteria for choosing this particular film. Also, it sounded interesting. I must say, within the first 10 minutes I thought, oh no, it's going to be one of those fucking Swedish films where it's all mud and angst and ugliness, really. Right. And it is a bit like that, right? But for me, the film got richer and richer as it unfolded, actually. I found it so interesting. I was riveted. I mean, usually watching a film at home of this length, I would have stopped 3 or 4 times for tea or coffee or something. And I didn't stop at all. I watched it straight through.
I wouldn't say I was riveted, but I definitely agree that it grows. It becomes much, much richer as the story unfolds. We should say, coming up will be spoilers. We're going to spoil the whole thing. A lot of stuff happens, and it's worth being surprised by it. So, if you're interested in seeing it, which you should be, see it before we tell you the plot just now.
So let me tell the plot a little bit, for the beginning. So the film begins with this character which we find out is called Tina, and she's very unattractive, and basically she works as a customs officer, and she's got this uncanny ability to sense people's feelings by smell.
Yeah, she's got this amazing sense of smell.
Yeah, so, and basically, she's got this very dull life. She's got a boyfriend who's really just smooching off of her, and they clearly don't have sex very much. Her father is institutionalized, and she goes to visit him regularly, and it's indicated at the beginning that there is a kind of a bond of feeling between them, that she's a good daughter.
Institutionalized in that he is old and kind of growing senile, rather than in prison.
That's right. And then kind of one day, she sniffs out this guy who's also not very attractive, who ends up not having anything. And then he takes the ferry again, she sniffs at him again, and this time the custom officer discovers that he looks like someone who's had a sex change. Yeah, that he looks like a man, but he's got a vagina instead of a penis.
Yeah, they do a physical inspection of him,
Yeah.
and the guy who does it says, you should have done this because turns out
That's
this
right.
man has a vagina.
So, anyway, but she senses something in this guy, and this guy moves into her house, and basically what they discover is they're alike, and there's like this amazing sex scene, which in which the troll who looks like a guy and this woman who we find out is also a troll end up having sex, and basically there's like a kind of a penis-like
Growth.
growth.
Kind of grows out like a stamen of a plant or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that comes out of her, you know, and she penetrates this seemingly male troll with. I thought that was an amazing sequence, actually.
It was mad.
Yeah,
And,
it's like nothing you've seen before.
actually, I think what was really amazing is what followed that, because that scene is the one where she physically realises her trollness, that
Yes.
she learns that she is a troll, and this sex scene happens. But what follows that is this freedom, this kind of running through the woods naked with the guy and swimming,
Yes.
this kind of this oneness with nature. It's kind of unoriginal in a sense, but it felt wonderful.
And it felt kind of original, actually, to me.
She spent such a long time feeling different, weird, dull, whatever, and to learn this thing about herself and to realise what her identity is.
Yes.
It's really expressive.
I read it very much as a trans narrative.
Yeah.
You know, that moment, yes. And actually, I found it like really intriguing. So, I mean, I read it as a trans narrative because the guy who externally looks like a bloke, ends up, you know, being the bearer of children. And, you know, the person or the troll who looks like a woman ends up kind of having the male genitalia that unfolds from her, right? And takes on that role in sex. So, you know, so that freedom that follows of like swimming in the forest and being at ease together and all of that, you know, and finding your true self, I kind of, it lends itself to that kind of reading. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
But then I thought what was interesting about it is that instead of making it seem like beautiful and romantic and everything, they're actually, you know, the film is very careful about showing you like, you know, the woman has like these hairy breasts, right? And kind of, the bloke is quite menacing, i.e. kind of being a troll doesn't necessarily make you a nice person, that it's kind of like, and in fact, kind of what we get in the middle of this is an investigation into a pedophile ring in which it turns out that the troll she invites into her house is involved in.
Vora, his name is Vora.
Right.
And and what's been happening is he's been stealing human babies, providing them to this paedophile ring, and part of his kind of his own interest in that isn't that he wants these. I mean, he says humans are already horrible enough; they do these things already, and they don't need that. They don't really need my help. What his interest is in replacing those babies with changelings, with troll babies that will then be raised by people who think they're raising their own human children. And he wants trolls to come back, basically. The trolls have been mistreated, tortured, experimented on, all this kind of thing. Because I read it as very much a kind of allegory of minorities. And otherness.
Well, there is that for sure.
I think that's a kind of huge part of it. And I think it's in a very general sense, because there's an extent to which it's about, you could read it as kind of the immigrant experience, but the idea with trolls is not that they came there from somewhere else. They were always there. I think the idea with trolls is that they weren't Christianized as the rest of Scandinavia was. So that kind of made them the evil sort of outsiders, but they were always natives to those regions. That's the idea behind them, I think. But that was one I was seeing all the way through. Or at least once I realised they were trolls. I guessed it's just slightly ahead of time.
Well, I read it. I mean, actually, I didn't read it through an immigrant experience, though. I think you can see it that way, actually, now the more I think about it. You know, but it definitely has elements of, you know, trans and you know, two-spirit people, as they call them. It also has elements of Nazi experiments on humans, yes. In the 40s, there's an element of that, right? So, the trolls were institutionalized and kind of experimented on and basically died very soon thereafter. So, there's element of that. And I suppose there's also kind of, these quest narratives of, what is a person? And, so on the one hand, a general narrative of what is a person, is a troll a person, right? And on the other hand, a more personal narrative of who am I, yes? So anyway, I thought it was very interesting, and it really did grab me until the end. And at the very end of the film, she receives basically a baby in the mail, which, I think we're meant to think is hers, right?
Maybe.
No, I think...
I think that has to be the implication, doesn't it?
Yeah, because, the thing is that the male troll periodically lays eggs that look like human beings, but they're really like clay. They need to be fertilized before they become like persons.
Well, trolls, yes.
Or trolls, yeah.
They're called, there's a word from hissit, Hiisit.
That's right. So, and it needs to be fertilized. And basically that moment of sex, I imagine, but I couldn't figure out whether it was that moment of sex or that moment of real anger, where they hiss at each other, that is actually the moment of fertilization.
My instinct would be that it is the sex.
Yes.
I suppose you can, these are imaginary creatures. You can, I suppose, make up what you want.
You can. Anyway, at the end, you get not just a Hiisit, but a real troll baby.
Yeah, with a beard.
With a beard, yes, that she feeds bugs to, right? So the film has all that kind of sense of dampness and dankness and, things you associate with as forest, mud and bugs and animals and, and clearly that's what she's most at home with, really. So, and there's these very interesting images at the end of the film where the house is deteriorating and you see almost like the bookshelves are now rickety and full of dust and the car door is open and you have foxes going, into the door. Yeah, like there's the sense that she's accepting her trollness,
Yeah, well, her trollness is sort of expressed partly through a connection with the natural world. That she you mentioned early on, she takes her shoes off to go outside. Who takes their shoes off to go for a walk in the woods, you said? Well, apparently trolls do. And that's what she does, and she has a sense of where animals are. That's something, she knows she's driving Mr. and Mrs. next door to the hospital to have their baby, but she slows down for an elk that's crossing the road before she even sees it.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So, because what I think is kind of interesting is, and I'm trying to think my way through, is the idea of, well, it's in the title, borders, right? The idea of differences, and because the way I think we should ideally think about race, as hard as it might be sometimes, is to think of ourselves as all the same, and everything else is societal on top of that. Everything that we construct as a difference, But in this film, it is very clear that trolls are one thing and humans are another.
I'm not sure, because I think, to me, the implication of the title is almost like the opposite. That, so there are borders, but they're always being crossed.
Yeah.
And actually it's interesting because, she works as a customs officer, so people crossing from one area to the other, right? And people bringing in things from one area to the other they shouldn't, right? So I think it's all about borders, right? Borders exist, but also they're permeable, they're there to be crossed. They're there to keep people away, right? So I think kind of the notion of borders in all of its implications is...
so this is kind of what I'm trying to think through, though, because... I don't know that the film necessarily offers an answer. I think there are all sorts of ways of reading it. There's a question in the film about what is it to be human, as you said, but I think in a way... that question actually poses itself as these people are not human.
Well, I think it poses the question of what it is to be human, because she asks it in a way. So she says, you know,
She says, "I don't want to hurt people."
yes,
Does that mean I think like a human, or does
Yes.
that make me human? She says something.
yeah. Well,
Along those
it was more than that. It's something like, I don't want to do evil. Does that mean,
Yeah,
you know, that I'm not a troll or something?
yeah.
I mean, it was probably part of the same conversation, but it was articulated in those ways, really.
On the ferry at the end.
Yeah. So I think kind of those questions of, you know, what is the self and who am I, are kind of and categories, right? Because, you know, so on one hand, she's passed for a human all her life, right? You know, she was bullied for being ugly and looking different and so on. And in fact, kind of, you know, she wasn't ugly or different, she was a troll. Well, she was different.
I think actually the question of it, the kind of philosophical question of what is a human, what makes us what we are, I think that's actually not one that the film is asking. Because the film basically says all these people are people. Troll or human, they're all people. It's about how we kind of choose to behave. And I think the question that she asks about the fact that I don't want to hurt people, does that mean I'm human instead of a troll to you? She asks the male troll character. That question isn't about what makes us human, it's about what makes us different and how we categorise ourselves. I think that's where the film is kind of working.
I'm not sure. I mean, because there is all that discussion of the paedophiles saying, you know, kind of people do this and, you know, kind of...
But I think I think that because from the male troll's perspective, saying that, you know, for him that's justification for hating all humans, or that's the way that he rationalises it. That's part of who he is
Yes.
someone who hates humans.
But the film's point of view is not with him.
Right. But I think what that makes it is not about what people do or what humans are like. It's about how he sees them and how he constructs his worldview, and it's different to the way she does. And he wants to categorise the both of them together, and he wants her to be part of his thing, bringing the troll population back in our new community in Finland right at the end.
Yeah, but the film complicates it, because part of that point of view is actually that she has been raised lovingly, by, you know, this couple who in fact were complicit in killing her parents, but nonetheless she was raised lovingly, whereas he went from institution to institution being abused.
Yeah.
So that kind of point of view on people is also a kind of a constructed one in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just makes those things.
No, I agree. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's like he was born hating people. You know, I think the film clearly gives you that context and background to the different ways these people think. But I think that is actually where the real fruit is in what the film's talking about. I don't think it's in this kind of more abstract question of just what makes us human. I think it's about what makes us think the way we do, and what makes us categorise ourselves, and are we justified? Are we rational? How do we choose to see people? So as I say, he chooses to see the evil in humans, or chooses maybe is not the right word. He can't help but see the evil in humans due to his background. She doesn't see it that way, but then he maybe takes what he thinks of humans as being as just that is the truth, you know. Because not every human is in a paedophile ring.
No. And in fact, he's providing the babies for those pedophile rings. So, you know, he is just as bad or worse than they are. He's certainly complicit in all the terrible things that, you know, the bad guys in the film do.
Though he chooses not to see it that way.
Yes.
He says they don't need my help, really.
Yes.
You know, so I get away with it.
What do you think of the film visually?
I think it's reasonably dull. I suppose I like the moments that I like the most visually were those in the forest, in the woods. I think they are kind of, they're rich and kind of just visually complex insofar as there's a lot in the frame, and the way that they use layers to kind of, you know, there's the woods and there's a character, then there's more in front of them. The characters are able to kind of get lost in the woods at points and get sunk into the moss and that sort of thing. I think is really beautiful.
I think the film is very successful at creating a kind of ambience. Yeah, so that's good. And the filmmakers really succeeded with that. But I don't think it's visually very interesting. I just think that, when you think of all of the tools that a filmmaker can bring towards expressing or adding nuance to story, it's like camera movement, right? Or shifts in focus, or, there's not too much of any of that here, actually.
Yeah.
It seems like very simple kind of filmmaking. The storytelling is coming from other elements. It's coming from the screenplay and the performances, and the setting and the makeup. Yeah.
Do you think the story gets a little overcomplicated towards the end? Does it try and twist make too many twists and turns plot-wise?
No, I don't, actually, because I think it all ties in very neatly together.
Yeah?
Yes, I think, ending with her, who's really a him, possibly, but is nonetheless the one to raise this child, right, in a different way than she's been raised. I think it's almost like the natural, logical ending that ties all these very loose ends together, right? The damage that they did to the next door baby, the pedophile ring, the fact that the baby in the fridge is not a baby but an egg.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of, to me, it ties in very neatly. It's a very good screenplay.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose I was thinking more kind of on its way to the ending, like with the paedophile ring and with all the one development comes very quickly after another, and I wondered whether you maybe thought it was twisting and turning too much.
I must say, I didn't see the necessity of making the troll that looks like a male but is possibly the female complicit in the paedophile ring.
Although I think in what we've been talking about, there may be some kind of value in that, because I think it is interesting to think about. Yeah. I think it is interesting to think about how he participates in it.
Yes.
But doesn't see himself as the bad guy.
Yes. But yes. Though I don't know, because there's this thing of him periodically popping out an egg that can't come to life. Yeah, because like this whole thing is about meeting other trolls who can fertilize it, right? And he's heard of some, there's a community in Finland, but they have to find you. You don't go find them. He tells us all of that. So, it must have some kind of effect on him to be periodically laying an egg that cannot be fertilized, whilst he's then kind of, punishing babies who are alive. That didn't quite. I think they could have done that better or removed it. I don't think the film would have lost anything by, kind of. The whole baby thing and, the egg and the fertilization and the end and being adopted and so on is enough to carry that motif without making him complicit in the trafficking and the abuse, right?
Maybe I don't know if I agree, but I see you.
Yes.
It's a question.
Well, I'm thinking aloud.
Yeah.
I'm not sure either, but it seems my first impression is that.
Do you think that the film is too interested in the kind of minutiae and the detail of drawing from the sort of legend of what trolls are, and the mythology of what trolls are, and then kind of contextualising it in the film? So, for instance, the thing about eating maggots, or the kind of connection with nature, or the fear of lightning. These are kind of troll things that are put rather like in Let the Right One In. It was the thing about having to be asked in.
Yes.
Kind of makes its way into the film.
I don't know, because I don't know anything about trolls.
Oh, right.
So
I only know a little bit, but that's why like 5 minutes before they said troll, I was going, because actually at that point I remembered you told me that it was the guy who wrote Let the Right One In who wrote the story behind this. And I'd forgotten that, and then I remembered it and went, "Oh right, so there's got to be something."
Well, you see,
but if it's not vampires,
the moment where they went into the woods, I thought they were going to be transformed into werewolves. You see, that's what I expected. I didn't kind of expect anything to do with trolls.
Yeah. No, I knew the thing about maggots, and I knew the thing about lightning being this kind of these aspects of what trolls are in sort of mythology.
Right.
So they're noticing them and putting them together with the author. But the other thing is, I had looked up the director before we saw it, and that may have informed why I started to see it as a story about kind of racial difference or categorisation of peoples because of the director being Iranian, Danish, dual nationality, and him maybe having an interest in that.
Well, I mean, I think that's definitely in the film. I mean, the thing about identity or otherness is very much a part of the film. It's when you tie it to migration that I'm not sure.
Well, no, I said I'm not sure myself about immigration because of the difference, but I think certainly there's otherness all over it, which also goes along with your trans reading. I mean, that's an otherness as well.
Yeah, and also this thing about fluid communities or communities in transition or fluid identities. What are you? Those are all kind of questions that lend themselves, dual nationalities or dual cultures or intercultures, right? I mean, I think the film is very rich. It certainly allows readings of all of those things, and they do seem to be kind of worked through metaphorically in the film in terms of the story that it's telling. So you see, a rich film after all, I think.
Yeah, I didn't say it wasn't. It's just it took its time a little bit, but it was intriguing from the start.
Yes.
It has one of those kind of intriguing openings where I wouldn't say arresting exactly. It doesn't grab you, but you go, oh, why is this woman smelling so much, and why does she look so weird?
Yes.
And from there, you're with it.
Yes. Anyway, I'm very glad we saw it, and it's a kind of film that we're not getting anywhere near our screens at the moment, so it's lovely that kind of MUBI gives us an opportunity to watch it at home.
Yeah. I'm glad we watched it, and we basically picked it out of a lineup of 30 films going, maybe this one.
Yes, and actually there were 30 other films that looked equally interesting. I mean, it's a thing about publicity, right? Because we looked through their list, and there wasn't anyone that I thought, oh, cool, we must see that right now, right? And in fact, I'd already seen about, a third of them, right?
Right.
Because if you're somebody interested in film, you'll have come across some of them, but it's the films are not supported by this massive amount of publicity that creates this feeling, oh, I must go see that, I've seen the trailer, I love it. It kind of it's almost like you have to go in a little bit blind and trust in the curation of MUBI itself, which I think I must say so far has been very good. I've been really interested in everything that I've seen from them, really.
Yeah.
And it's always been a bit blind because
you can always rely on them to give you an interesting movie.
Yeah, what I would call a serious film. Yeah, a film that's done that aspires to be art in some way, and that's also done with a certain level of craft. That's going to be an interesting film. Whether then it's to your taste or not is a different story. Yeah, but kind of, they're all kind of. Yeah, films interested in, aesthetics, and also kind of dealing thematically with issues in a kind of a complex and interesting way.
Yeah.
And this is a very good example of it.
It is. Yeah, worth a watch, certainly.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. At Eavesdrop Movies is the handle. The website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com. And if you give us a listen, then a like and a share, and that would be lovely.
Yes,
because it helps.
Yes, so
only if you liked it. Be honest,
Yeah, otherwise, fuck off.
Your words, not mine.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye bye.
Bye.